Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Tonight I have a guest with us, Anon, who is going to share some of his experience and some of his perspective, and specifically getting into color programming and how it is so foundational in influencing both people individually, specifically, and then in mass, and how it is integrated into many facets of entertainment and so on and so forth, and some other things. This is going to be a very raw talk, so I would caution people, you know, make sure this is the sort of thing that you're ready for, and pace yourself if need be. It can cause some stirring within, um, but we are really going to dive right in. And keep in mind, really to dig in deep, sometimes you got to get to the nitty gritty. And I mean, if you've been there, you know what everybody's been through. So, we appreciate everybody's allowance of space, to just get raw and address these very serious aspects, in, hopes and in good faith of helping people free themselves from it. So, with that, Anon, I appreciate you greatly for taking the time. And if you would, introduce yourself as you wish and give us a brief history of mind control and the things related as you see them.
Yes. Hello. Thank you. So, really don't have much to share personally quite yet on the likes of myself. I just am a mind control survivor, uh, and I personally take numerous amounts of notes and have been working with my own, what I call system, for a very long time now. And was able to create these charts and the things that will be shown with the help of Gray. So something that doesn't get spoken about, in my opinion, obviously, all these things are my opinions. That's how this works. Something that doesn't get spoken about is a more dumbed down version to sort of make things palatable. Because as survivors and systems, we can come out to individuals, especially after a lifetime of torture, we tend to seek out attention in a way of save me or these things are real, someone believe me to that nature. And this is usually what the average person sees. And if they don't know that they're mind controlled, obviously it doesn't work out so well. If they are not mind controlled, then we seem absolutely uh, loony. So, um, with the history that I've written up here, I've sort of dumbed down where mind control really, in my opinion, took off. And so, what I want to start with is a very big part of mind control is chakras. There's a big mind and body connection. The perpetrators really like to use that. And so in 1500 BCE, chakras were made in India. Now, this is something that's really common when you see Buddhism, Hinduism, talk about India. It's especially in America, in my opinion, it's spoken in a very high degree, the chakras and finding your inner self. Well, mind control is a tool that uses chakras. So before 600 BC was what I would call prehistory. Not many records were kept of what people did to try to record uh, most of the the things that would be considered mind control. At that time, they were not called mind control. It was simply curiosity for the means of India and Asia to have practices which began with what you might know as animism. This is something that Egypt does as well, and it's a very big part of programming with ritual abuse. So we're taking humans' natural curiosity before 600 BC, and it becomes experimentation on each other. This is the why the earth, why space, why God, why life, why death. Now, India began the first experimentation of what is called enlightenment. In my opinion, and based on my studies, as well as the fact that I was trafficked all over the world, and one of the places was in India. Got to learn a lot, and they use enlightenment with the children as an indoctrination tactic for their young to be servants. This is why Gandhi would have a bit of philandering with children as well, and was spoken in a higher esteem to the people that did not know what was actually going on, because that's usually how it goes. They use enlightenment the same way that a system would use in a world. So when you become enlightened, a part of you becomes somewhere else. This is a different word for mind control or ritual abuse, what we would call it now, as it is written now. Then, mind you, this is 600 BC. It was enlightenment. It was spiritual practice. It was culture. So the indoctrination for the young with the methods that we now call trafficking and mind control were called spiritual practice. And it stayed secret, as did India keep a lot of secrets. So in 600 BC, a bit after, the Romans and the Greeks essentially started to say, we have answers. We understand why Earth, why God. We have math, we have science. And we've seen what India is doing. They're creating demons. And this is because when you abuse a child, the way that they did with this enlightenment path that they were doing, it creates behavior that what we now see in mind control as very unhealthy, very PTSD related. I mean, you've got to think about these children. They didn't get the diagnoses of PTSD, but that's what they were dealing with. And this, at this time, was being called demons. So the Persians and the Germans took a bit of an interest in this. Demons became something that terrified the religious and the spiritual and gave interest to those that were more like perpetrators who wanting to use it for different devices. The Catholics, they obviously were around the same time and they claimed to know their own God and they demonized the whole thing. So you've had all these different spiritualities, all these different religions that were starting to take off, and people were at each other's throats, so to speak, which then began the first secret service, which was the Templar Knights. And we know these as the Freemasons. Now, you can go into your own history lesson on that. I'm sure there's a bunch of things to it. But as you get to the Middle Ages, when the Roman Empire collapsed, I believe this was around 476 AD. I could be wrong. I'm still trying to figure out some of the dates. 250 years of the Crusades, which is in my opinion, because I'm trying to transfer the information of what definitions do we use now in comparison to what they had then. Ritual mind control or enlightenment for the sake of creating the perfect child slave or people that are slaves, 250 years of the Crusade is the equivalent of 247 years of mind control in America. We're at 247 years. And that's usually about the time frame that it takes for an empire to fall, which, based on these things, to me, seem to correlate with mind control. In the 1450s, this is when technology started to kick in, printing press was invented. To 1750, people started to say all the different reasons that they know God. You've had Lutheranism, the redefinition of Christianity, and the separation of the Catholic Church. People were starting to make art, music, philosophy, and it was getting popular. In the 1400s, this is when the South American soldiers were being used. Now, if you've got people that know that you can create demons with mind control, then you've got people that know that you can utilize it in a dangerous way. So again, what we call trafficking, torture, and abuse in that era was used differently. This bled into the Secret Service military, which created the influences for the CIA. And so between 600 BC in India, where creation of altars and parts was called enlightenment and spiritual practice, each historical layer traveled down, cult after cult, abuser after abuser, eventually reaching the creation of the CIA, because the Germans and the Persians and the others that were watching, they got excited about the idea of the creation of demons via mind control, being able to mindlessly do damages for land and wealth. It's always been a land and wealth war. This should have been called trafficking and torture and slavery, but that was hidden. So between 1750 and 1840, the creation of technology was used for things like mind control. 1776, America was established. And around this time, this is, as we know, there's a lot of connections with mind control with Great Britain and the Freemasons. And I really don't need to go into those families. It's quite obvious. In 1865, the book Alice in Wonderland was created. In 1869, Light and Flight was created. So now we've got these upgrades. If we're going to be creating more mind control, now we're getting more and more. What was fascinating to me was that in 1911, the formal diagnosis of autism was called schizophrenia. Schizophrenia and autism were the same diagnoses by Eugene Lauer. Well, I don't know how to say his name correctly, but around the same time, Hollywood was incorporated, 1903, merged with LA in 1910 by a Canadian real estate who was called the father of Hollywood. Now, obviously, don't need to go into how terrible Hollywood is because that's obvious. 1911, formal diagnosis, autism, schizophrenia. There's an entire book when it comes to DID, and uh, I'll just say DID. When it comes to DID, where people are learning the differences between is it schizophrenia, is it DID? But no one's truly talked about how common autism is in DID as well. In 1923, Walt Disney is established in Hollywood. In 1951, Alice in Wonderland is created by Disney, the exact same year as MK Ultra. So between 1939, which is the Holocaust testing, And as we know, the different tools that we used with World War I and World War II, what I saw this as is if I'm really watching between India and all this history just going down and down, you're getting to see these individuals learn. The more you use mind control, the more you use these tools, the more you can create mindless war machines and what they liked to call demons. They were creating all these different ways that they could do what they wanted to do. And 1940 was obviously the Nazis testing their own demon creation. I don't know if you're allowed to use that word, but that's the word that it was. And in 1950, MK Ultra tech and political support to fund the CIA, which is trafficking. It's trafficking programs that they've gone on since India, but now there's more technology at this point. In 1948 to 1975, we had the Edgewood Arsenal experiment. The LSD on soldiers, which is about 7,000 soldiers that were tested with 250 chemicals, one of which is not talked about, which is the dicyanide goggles, which made them believe that the planes that they were seeing were actually dragons. So, taking out people that mind controlled, pop some dragons in there, obviously, what's it going to be? Demon. And this
Yes,
led to,
they discontinued those goggles. They had the red,
yes, they
right, and
did.
the Dionycide goggles. Yeah,
Yes, they
and
did.
everybody was seeing what they believed was demons flying around. Yes.
Exactly. And do you see how it goes down so easily? If you play it in order, it's so easy to see all of it. And then it gets to 1970 with Christopher Hill create the rainbow color used in chakras, which just so happens to correlate with a system programming in Monarch systems. And he creates nuclear evolution, seven chakras, seven colors. And shortly after that, after the rainbow, because we've got Walt Disney, we've got a Holocaust, 1939, Nazis, 1940. We've got MK Ultra, 1950. Walt Disney in Hollywood, 1951. And then we've got the rainbow color of the chakras, 1970. And then in 1978, the first LGBTQ flag is made, and it is the rainbow color, having already the influence of India and Egypt's use of energy for color. India has stayed the most secret in all mind control programming. It is used along with Egypt as an example of ancient wise practice. It's not spoken about as something directly used. And so the flag was made, flown in San Francisco for LGBTQ by Gilbert Baker from Kansas. Guess what? Born in 1951. So right as MK Ultra is going on, Gilbert was born in 1951. He's from a Methodist family, and he just so happens to be a medic in the U.S. Army. He was a part of the first legalizing of marijuana initiative with Prop 19, which then led me to because you've got the whole uh, rabbit rabbit hole thing with Alice in Wonderland in 1951, created by Walt Disney. In 1999, it's got the Matrix. What does the Matrix use? And we also know a lot of programming uses the Matrix. And a lot of people say red pill this and blue pill that, but they don't pay attention to the fact that the only reason that those colors are used is because in mind control system, the very first flip are red and blue. Blue is knowledge of things without the physical feeling of it. Red is not knowing why, but feeling all of it. And the Matrix was used as an example right in your face of this type of programming, which then led to 2005, the use of the rainbow again as the infinity symbol, which is also connected with the Mobius toroidal universal model, if you know anything about that. And it is the sign of neurodiversity. So, so between
Autism
1911,
and neurodiversity. Sorry,
yes, yes,
absolutely. This is so important for people to understand how once the basis has been established for this, that things are rolled
yes,
out and that this is the start of movements that people are routed into.
yes. And in 1911, autism was being routed with schizophrenia. Now, in 2005, at this point, then it was thought out differently. And 1 in 36 people right now, 1 in 36 people has autism. Those are the statistics. Between 1911 to now, suddenly 1 in 36 people has autism. I find it hard to believe. So when I'm looking at the history of mind control, the the beginning of it being when I really got to pay attention to what they were doing in India, I was saying there's this fancy language for the enlightenment and astral travel and leaving your body and going within all these things. And it reminded me of of my training when I was out there and how they used this word to create inner world. And I thought I need to study a bit more about India because it's not spoken about. And India specifically tries to stay hidden in many ways. You cannot speak about certain things. It's very disgraceful. They're very offended when you bring up the elders, you bring up the history in a way that is not wisdom filled. But that's because they they got away with trafficking, just the same way that Korea, Japan, and what the fuck, Austria got away with war
Normalizing
crimes.
under certain practices that
Yes,
would be
war
acceptable
crimes.
given certain circumstances, just like under a lot of religious practices, and you definitely
Correct.
see this, and it's just interesting as you've been talking about this. I think about the ebbs and flows between people really looking to spiritual and religious practices, and then a little bit more to science and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, some
Yeah.
of these groups, I think, are still applying these same practices methodically, building on them as they go. And then the way they play out in public is just according to the context of that amount of time, whether it be they say, oh, these are demons and these, people, oh, they're witches. Oh, this is happening, or that, or now
Yes.
let's diagnose them with this in the system or diagnose them with that. Is it the same thing still going back in time all the way? That's been the same sort of method and recipe applied, just in different settings, and people are understanding it. But yeah, I think this is a science that's been built, and now it's so methodical again. It's almost, you mentioned way back how it was just like built into the culture and stuff, and you see some of these
Yes.
playing out now that you just built up to kind of the some of these, and not even attacking people, but understanding that if you are all in on a basis that was handed to you, hey, it's interesting that these colors correspond with this, and this system that was set up that corresponds with gate, stem, or steam, and the certain colors apply to the certain sort of brain functions, and this is applied. This seems to be a system that's standardized, and so on and so forth. And what's to this? And it's really interesting hearing you go through the history and the perspective of it and kind of reflecting on that. But continue.
Yes. The 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 way that mind control, at least from what I've seen in America, the way that it's spoken about, and in my opinion, this is because America being used as a project for MK Ultra for a very long time and being in a sense of power for 247 years. It's just too similar to the 250 years of the Crusades. And so I thought, what is the deal with what kind of mind control was going on at the time then that's different to now? And it's not different. The language is different. It's still trafficking. It's still murder. It's still torture. It's just got technology. It's got VR headsets. It's got media,
It's the
and
same play. It's recast with a
it
different setting
is.
and different
It
characters.
is. And they want people to look back, these perpetrators, they want people to look back on history with wisdom, to look at these ancient, as they call them, ancient Asia, India. They want them to look back and only see the highlights. It's not to say that India and Asia are terrible. It's to say that the trafficking in America is in everyone's face. But the trafficking that was in India and is in India and Asia, it gets to look different when it's not. It's just not. America may have more money, but the trafficking dynamic, getting a child to believe that they're enlightened by the spiritual practices of being trafficked and being in slave labor and being a child soldier. Those are all the things that they do in America with the facilities, with the
The
schools,
same
with the drugs.
underlying principles, the same
Yes, it is the
predatory
exact same thing.
practices. Yes, the same
Yes,
crimes against children and humanity by the same sort of bloodthirsty, power hungry, money hungry
yes.
mentality.
And if you've got a business, I'm just speaking from a perpetrator's perspective, which people need to think because perpetrators are predators and predators are real. And if you don't understand how a predator thinks, then you are going to be always prey. But if you're someone who is just simply in your mind because
Mhm.
you cannot see past it, if you just are running a business, then anything that gets in the way of that is upsetting to you. You can take offense to it. I sometimes see that survivors, because they get to see how many people are outraged at the damages that has been done, they don't think about the fact that predators feel quite harmed as well. They have people that support them and validate them when they feel that they've been harmed by something that someone has said. So, and I'm
Yes.
sure you've seen that they, and sometimes, most of the time, they're mind controlled as well. So they've got a whole set of programs of their own responding, and a long enough amount of time of people that are controlled this way, it simply becomes scarce. But the ones that know the real foundation of their business, they're lurking in the background and they really don't want specific things to be brought up. That's when they start to freak out. So when I put this together, it was simply to say, I'm just, I'm a speck in the middle of this mind control program. And I really want survivors to understand for all the threshold and the terrible and the spinning and the responses that you get internally with all the parts that react out of complete terror and fear, they're coming from a place of another part doing their job, which is to shut off the knowledge and to bring up the feelings. But if you do enough system work, you can balance those things and you can go, wait a minute, this has been going on since 1500 BCE. I'm a speck in the middle of this mind control thing. I just so happen to be a part of the upgraded technology era. And it's not to say that any of it is good, but that terror that they put in systems that this is custom to you. Biggest lie. The biggest lie they can tell you. This is a long business.
Yes, it helps make it more digestible too. You know, it seems so
Yes,
big, people are looking at it, but in reality, it's a small part of it. Let's put it into perspective, and it's a lot more approachable. So I appreciate the
yes,
way that you're approaching this. And, you know, if you have a sick, you know, rabid, you know, dog that's on the outskirts of town and it's attacking the children, you know, and it's elusive. You have to learn like what's going on, what happens when these sick dogs get rabies and start acting erratically. What are they doing? What time do they hide in the bush? You learn about them so you can
yes,
protect the town from them. Well, we have some sick, rabies infected, parasite infected hound dogs that are
yes.
circling around our children. And we need to know everything about them and understand what's going on in their brains so we can defend against it. Okay? So
Correct.
I really appreciate you, you know, bring this presentation and these charts that you have supplied and everything. Is there anything you'd like to go into more before we move to show some of these charts and go into explaining some of these systems and color?
Yeah. So the next thing to sort of go into is kind of like how I was communicating about the matrix and how you've got the first split is the red and the blue. When you learn about the red and the blue parts, they will always be opposite of each other. They will always be internally at odds. It will feel completely different to interact with either of them, and it can be very elusive because of the other part's jobs. So going into color programming from there, I think would be a good start.
Absolutely. And so again, to remind everybody, viewer discretion is advised. And you know, this is delicate, as Anon kindly, you know, reminded people. You know, if you get some spinning or some other things, remember it's parts, you know, that are doing their job. You know, perhaps you can use that sensation and kind of follow that and communicate with it, and you know, really sit there and think about how you're feeling and find that and work on that to, you know, perhaps do something else instead of spinning for a job. You know, this information is definitely going to go deep and help, but it could be destabilizing in ways, and it's, I guess in this sort of things would be considered a hard topic or advanced. So you know, viewer discretion advised. Now, another aspect that I want to start on is talking about safety when you're deciding to speak out publicly, when you're pursuing healing and making right decisions for yourself. I want to say, first
Oh
and
yeah,
foremost, one of my rules is when it comes to security, absolutely no sudden decisions of trusting someone. You do not need to suddenly trust someone and tell them everything. One of the first things when you get ready to reach out is people dump all the information too much. One, it can be too much for someone if you're actually reaching out for help. Two is you could actually be reaching out to someone and reporting to them. That the impulse to tell everything. Sure, you've been waiting to find someone to talk to and so on and so forth. So that, you know, can be a natural tendency, but it's extrapolated upon, and there's a good chance that you are throwing off major signals or also encoding certain information or just telling too much information to a party that you are actually reporting to or posting it publicly to report to, including personal information about your own system or so on and so forth. So it's just very important. I say no super sudden decisions on major trust of new parties, especially. Sleep on it. You know, unless if it's imminent danger on yourself, do not make sudden decisions. You will get emotional waves. You will get a lot of sudden urges, and you might not be able to attribute them to something happening happening in your life. So you might automatically, since it's a flashback of feelings, you might automatically try to project them onto something in front of you. So you just have to know what you're dealing with. You're about to dig in deep. You could get sudden upheavals of emotions without any sort of context or information. It could just be feelings. You got to realize that might happen and be careful not to project them onto people around you to start fights, start arguments, so on and so forth, or just to destabilize and make any rash decisions, no self-sabotaging, so on and so forth. So it's definitely an important aspect. And as I say that, I'm handing it over to Anon here, who has took he has made major steps to really reach out and help people. And he has had several drawings. One we were showing, I guess, part of a drawing, and the others we converted into a chart, into a digitized chart. Now there is some typos and so on and so forth because we're very busy people just doing our best to help. So you'll notice some typos, but these charts are going to be available to people. We had to convert some because we're not trying to hand over all the handwriting, and some people are trying to maintain layers of anonymity, for safety for themselves and those around them. So I'd ask everybody to respect that. But we're going to turn over to Anon here for the presentation, go over these charts, and if you would, I guess just kind of touch on deciding to speak out and, maybe some reporting urges, stuff like that, how it ties into color programming. Really,
Yes.
whatever you want to do. And if you want to guide me on these charts, however you would like to do it, I guess we can go over these, maybe go through them, and obviously I can get to the split screen as well, but I'll just hand it over to you and you just direct however you want to go.
All right. Also, I wanted to say, because systems can have a habit of doing the dichotomous communication style where it's too many things at one type of thing. Uh, what is important to understand is that where there is urgency, there is programs. So if you've got a sense of urgency, if you urgently need to do something, leaving the home, going somewhere, talking to someone, sending a message, whatever it is, a sense of urgency is based in a program. Because outside of mind control, we have freedom to choice. And it's a slow process of being able to say, what would I like to do? How do I feel? But mind control does not allow for these things. Mind control sets off looping things and reactions, urgency, crises, these type of things. So as you go through this with us, the urgency that will come up for specific parts, it's going to come in waves, it's going to come up and go down. And as you can simply say, a sense of urgency is a sign of a program. It's going in the direction of going against programming for you to be able to sit with it. And if you cannot, that's perfectly fine. There is nothing against it. But I just want to be able to prepare you that the internal battle will begin as these things are approached.
Thank you so much for saying that because it's so important. There's nothing to lose by just being aware of how you feel and making sure that you maintain awareness and introspection of how you're reacting and noticing it.
Yeah,
Okay, the part of it taking control against mind control is deliberately critically thinking about urgency, decisions, and all that. It's exactly right. You pulled that thread, so to speak. Thank you so much.
yeah.
I, I'm listening.
So I built this chart essentially because I've seen all the others, and you could pop up the what's called the blah blah, some bullshit blah blah
You
is
want me
what
to
we
split
call it.
screen it with you want me to split
Yeah,
screen it with what we're looking at?
yeah. So when I talk with other survivors, they bring up these. other types of things. And as I've spoken to perpetrators before, they quite enjoy the confusion that they cause with all these different maps and such. So yeah,
What are we looking at
I
for?
believe
Because
it's
there's,
the one that says left and the right.
I got you.
That one.
Understood.
Yeah.
This one, yes, yes, okay.
So
And again, remember the Chakras, Christopher Hill, 1970. Go ahead, sorry.
yes, yeah. So the when you look at this, people say, wow, the wisdom, the mathematics, the creativity, the ancient this and that, that it gets the attention of the parts that it's supposed to, and it's got all the symbolism and everything, and it's a coded system. I mean, if you look at a motherboard in a computer, you can see nothing about the actual way that the computer is working unless you understand the motherboard. So for those that create mind control, they understand the foundation of the coding that they've built here. And if we're trying to educate people about mind control, you've got to dumb it down. For those of you that communicate with people about it, and you're flustered and you listen to me, I've been through this, you're not listening, that type of thing. These idiots, no offense to them, but it's really what I can't help but call them. Because how long mind control's been able to go on is it, too long. But these idiots, they create different ways to handle it emotionally. And so they create something that's so complex, almost in an ego sort of state. So I wanted to create something that was just not complex at all. Because you've got the core, that's that middle, um, and I've got my friend had the drawing done. And so what I had her do was create kind of what I was describing as I was describing it. I think she did a good job. The middle is the core, obviously. Now that's connected with the first split. It's the most separate. It's you're not going to get access to it because there's so many seals around it. And the more that you learn about the programming, the more you will learn just how many are guarding just that memory alone. The left is used as the simulation of inner world. So when the child is really young, they have them create their own inner world, essentially. And I don't know if we're going from the perspective that people have ever learned or read any of the books. I assume that I guess I just describe it. But the left brain is supposed to be the blue, the blue part. And the blue is the split that knows every single thing about the internal structure, the digital world, as I called it, which is suspended reality. If you get individuals believing in this enough, you can use things the way that India does with the Enlightenment and the dimensional theories, and you can disconnect them from the mind control. Because remember, mind control is a business. Mental illness is different than DID. DID in mind control, it is a business. So they need to have the child's brain have the business structure inside of it. And so they've got gates gatekeepers, computers, and specific persecutors that are going to be on that left side that will be basically protecting all the knowledge of the inner world. And if you don't know what inner world is, it's simply the place where all the memory goes based on the parts. So if you've got, what is it, 86 billion neural pathways and neurons or something like that. If you've got all of these pathways, for each thing that happens to a child's body in this time frame between newborn to 8 years old, let's say, that's a very long time to be able to make parts. And depending on how they do it and what they're doing, they're going to need a structure. And so they use this. Yes, you can see the Mobius in that as well. They use the Mobius for everything because it they want to create the, what is it, as within, so without, as above, so below. It's it's easy for them to use that stuff. But if you just think of it, just in a, we're just speaking about the idea alone, mind control alone. As a structure, as a business, the business structure is the computer needs to contain all of the files of the memory of where the body's been, what age it was, the locations that are in the real world, and the simulations that need to be created to hide that. It's got all the different layers, and so the map is there. Then you've got, and each monarch system had them, the butterflies that are right around the core. There's a whole net, there's a whole area that is used to sort of trap them. There's everyone's got their own version of how they're trapped, but they're right in the middle and they guard the core because it's angels, butterfly, core, and it's layer after layer. And so the spinning program is used right there in the middle. And when you get that panic, you get that stress feeling, that's all that is. It's that you stirred up something that was from the simulated structure on the left is not matching up with what is being seen in the outer world. The outer world is where the physical body is and what people see of how the body is presenting.
A-
And
And
usually the child needs to, yes,
and just to make sure I'm following to give the people, an understanding here. So the spinning program, essentially, we're talking about there will be a situation where the child's actually spun at a super high rate. And then there will be post hypnotic suggestion so they re experience that sort of thing tied in with the program.
yes,
Making sense?
yes. And they
When the
do that
spinning
at a young
program is
enough
going off. I'm
age.
just explaining so that people understand like what it feels
Correct.
like. You're hitting this certain information that's not matching up or obviously goes outside of the set parameters that were
Yes, yes,
specifically told, neuro linguistic programming, specific scripts, specific instructions in that beat down programming receptive state. And this, yes, and essentially this is spin programming. Sorry, I just want to make sure people are understanding that we're actually a spinning physical sensation we can go on.
yes, yes. And they find creative ways to do it. With me, they use the NASA Mercury gimbal and convinced some parts of my system that they were time travelers. So spinning in that is quite interesting. But the do you see the censored, frozen, mute, blind, deaf control at the top there?
Yes.
So when the first splits are happening, they need the combination of the reactive ones versus the non-reactive ones. And so that's so they can create the difference between how do you present in outer worlds to everyone to hide the mind control versus what you actually know and experience in the inner world, and these trade off depending on the different jobs. So this is going to be the blue. The first split is going to be connected with the blue. As you've got the blue parts, you'll notice that they're more less emotional, quite stoic, strict. They can be aware of many sadness, but not understand how true sadness is. They don't know how they're feeling. They they're not doing well, but they're unaware of what's really going on. Whereas the red parts, they are the despair, confusion, uncertainty, and punishment. So each of these has a different layer. And when the first splits happen, it's really important to these people that the first splits happen. And this chart right here is swapped. We needed to
Should
put
I hold
the
off on this chart? I was trying to
no,
get
it's fine. It's just that the outer world one goes on the right and the inner world goes on the left, and
yep.
that's it.
Just so people
It's a
see
bit confusing. Yeah,
exactly, this should be mirrored because on the image on the left, you have
correct.
the inner world is on the left, but in the image on the right, the inner world's on the right. So it's
Yes, so
actually literally mirrored. These two images are mirrored to each other,
yeah.
so to speak.
So let's focus on the inner world one and kind of zoom on this along
This
with the other side.
is this where we're going?
Yes. So um the blue parts are going to transfer the data. So this is when you've got parts that can speak. They're allowed to uh they cannot speak, or they know things. These are more militaristic. They've got a lot of knowledge, and you'll have a lot of internal shame and suggestions, and there's a combination between the shame and the rewarding. And what I wanted to do was to be able to show that when there's training going on, there's a reward in different ways. So when a child has experienced torture, obviously the torture ending would be considered the reward. But there are some parts that don't experience torture. They experience something else entirely in a positive way, and the reward is very different than everyone else. And this is to create inner conflict that makes it so that when you get memory, as the part that you are gets memory, you essentially are taking on different parts of memory, but it's being transferred in a strange way. So some will be fighting about, well, I've never done that. No, that can't be real because we've never been to a mansion or something like that. But other parts will experience, yes, this is what I've experienced. If you go to the left more on the other one, yes, this one,
On this,
no, no, uh, this one, yeah. So allow to be seen with the mind. Everything that goes on with the blue and that goes on within a world is allowed to be seen and experienced with a mind only. And this is why the yellow parts are really helpful. They're very connected with gold as well because it's based on time. And if you get a part to, as a perpetrator, if you get a part to control time, then when someone is dealing with memory issues, you simply have that part that comes out and then timeline changes. Now, when people experience switches, especially because it's about 7 to 10 switches at a time, depending on the how upgraded each of the systems is. The systems that are more upgraded, I think it's 2012, they've gone up to 10 switches, which is dreadful, but used to be 7, I believe. If you've got all of these, there's a structure that they go with. And so as the abuse happens to the child, essentially, there's a part that's supposed to be intuitively aware based on the god of their understanding, which is usually the abuser. Whatever they decide, that is what is godlike. And so there's that, and then there is what is known by knowledge and logic, and what is known by feelings. And that each, when you've got parts that are split work in that way, where you can feel. I've spoken to many systems where they say, no, that was not me. That was not me. I know that was not me. And then it's got persecution type of behavior, usually the um, feeling based ones. It's a combination sometimes, depending on the color. But the what would be considered triad, I guess, would be the intuition, the feeling, and the logic split. And they really use this split aspect because it needs to be complex enough. So that's why you've got the gatekeeper, the computer bots, and the different kinds of persecutors that are guard. They will guard the inner world a certain way. The common tactic that is used is the reverse of thought or belief. So in internally, if the body is moving about an outer world, the reverse of what is said changes things. So reverse action, do more, say more. Reverse of thought or belief, do less, say less. And so if a blue part is influencing, say, a pink part, the pink parts are always the reporters. They'll be in the open, they'll share, they communicate. There are 3 different types of reporters. There's the pink reporter, which is being used specifically by handlers most of the time to directly share feelings about what the what is going on in inner world and how it feels to have the new discovery. It's essentially the part trying to, or the handler or those that are around, figuring out, is this system learning about their memory? And so the job will be influence the pink part to get close to those that will let them speak. The purple part will move the body. So it's a different kind of reporter. They will physically be motivated to move the body. They know that they've got a course of action that's supposed to be done. Probably would start a cult, a riot. They would be more likely, you can see it actually in Hollywood. Just before someone gets caught, they've got the combination of purple and Anon. because the orange is the next one that is skewed. And the orange is put in the open as an alert system that is influencing the world to see paranoia. And at that point, the abusers use that to say, if the orange part is out, they're going to start flooding addresses and names. It's going to be a problem. There's a problem. Too many codes are being shared. But when the pink is speaking, it's different. It's organized in a way that it's not the same level of threat. It can be moved around because a pink part can be given thematics and spinning way faster. An orange part can be given semantics, but they don't necessarily believe everything that's going on. And they're more based in a program. So if you as a system, I realize this, I'm saying many colors and many things at once, so you slow me down if you need to. But um, if
Yeah,
the
I mean, just keep going. There's no way about it. You're explaining it, and this is the type of thing
right, we
people
did
may
we
have
did say
to
the
go over
discretion thing.
multiple
Yeah.
times, and they have these charts to aid them as well. So,
Yes. So so when I work with systems, what I experience every single time, it could be something as small as so the first split of red and blue, immediately a purple will come out, and they will say, "Oh, for some reason, I saw a flash of orange," and that's because it's an alert program, and the orange goes because it's an alert program. It goes into any color. So there is no orange part. There is only orange programming. And that's because it's an alert system.
and
But the other parts,
going
yes,
to this state, obviously, our audience here should be well aware that, early in childhood, sitting in these completely pink, completely orange rooms, so on and so forth, all this is embedded so much that you may just get a flash, but that flash is such a clue. And,
yes,
these parts specifically, while you're mentioning that multiple parts get activated and stuff, it can make it a little bit harder to trace your impulses to say, oh, this is actually reporting because it's layered and different parts are doing different things to move your body, to move your mouth, to do this, to explain this, to post this. So, it's a process to become aware, but to trace this back to the roots and to realize how you can be manipulated even just by a color, but then by a color and a command or, so many and so forth. Sorry, I just wanted to interject with a little bit more context here as you continue.
yeah, definitely. This is it's very important to be able to understand that there is no foolproof way for the first time that you challenge color programming for it to be easy. It is not. It never will be. Because this is the motherboard of programming. It's the beginning of all of it. How do you train a child? Shapes, numbers, color. It really is that simple. That's how you know you're dealing with people that knew that this needed to be simple. So, as advanced as and frightening as they seem, because when you're a child and you're being tortured, these things are very terrifying. As an adult, you can understand that this is very elementary stuff, and they need it to seem complex so that you don't go looking. But the reality is that you're not experiencing that it's complex. You're experiencing semantics of the alarms that go off to the things that the system knows need to stay hidden. If every time you walked into a place that was locked down, the alarm would go off, you shouldn't be shocked by the fact that the place that's closed, it's locked. There's a security
Right.
guard right there, but you're just walking right in. Obviously, the alarms are going to go off. It's the same thing with this. If all programming is designed for the inner world to know the structure of the colors, but for you to just say, well, such and such is my favorite color. Well, I've realized that I want to change my clothes to this, my hair to this. I like this. It seems to casually fit in, but as system, it's very important to study and understand what colors are you interacting with on the daily? Because this is the stealth way that you can find out who in the inner world is sent out to do a job in the outer world. I was able to test this with cups. I believe I've said this before, but when I first started breaking down the color programming, I used plastic cups because I was noticing certain things, and I said, what if I just got all the different colors of cups? And if I have my drink when I first wake up, which cup do I grab? And then I began to do this with shirts, and I began to do this with pencils and different things. And I was able to naturally see that the programming was moving all around me in the way that is so elementary that I was saying, it's no wonder the handlers could see me as a toddler, all my parts navigating about, because they were watching what I was wearing, what I was eating, what I was doing. It was so easy to see. And then when they combine numbers and words into it with these specific colors or whatever it is combined with coding, they go deeper the more they have to hide. But the beginning of it, if you just start with the color, it
It can't
dismantles a lot.
it can't be overstated. Before, even before shapes to an extent. I mean, obviously this is not my field of neurology, but before linguistics, before all this, yes, colors. And the children are associating colors with things. And at this point in time, with the way everything is integrated with media, I'd heard you mention even at the beginning of some shows that will open up and certain things close with certain things. Obviously they
Yes,
associate certain colors with moods. They associate certain colors with this. Then you have, certain colors associated with certain sciences, certain with certain maths, this and that with the STEM, with the STEAM, which is,
yes,
essay curriculum, with the GATE programs, the gifted and talented, the, autistic, neurodivergent, LGBTQ. These are all built up on this color system, and it cannot be overstated how much people are influenced by these colors. And we're just talking about people that are brought up in the culture that get used to it naturally. Whenever this color is around, so is this. You naturally associate this thing just being immersed in the environment. But then when you have someone that is programmed on top of that, it is such a strong mechanism for control. And I think before we go back into this more to the charts, it's just, people need to appreciate that by just really becoming self aware and taking note of any time of colors at play, whether they're expressing something, whether they're thinking about it. Sure, is it natural? Is it casual? It may be. Become aware, observe, and you will see the pattern, because there will be a pattern. There's
yes,
patterns even for people that aren't programmed. It's the pattern that they adopted as they were raised. You see, just naturally. But programmed people will have a pattern, and color is such a strong method that is tied in again with the GATE curriculum. It's tied in with the LGBTQ. It's tied in with the autism, the neurodivergent, and they are all relating to the same things. This is a system that is being employed strongly directly on specific individuals, but generally to the masses. Okay, and it's very effective. And just starting with the simple association of recognizing the influence that it has on you, again, cannot be overstated. It cannot be. And so
Yes.
again, I appreciate this, amazing, presentation because it's just so much. And if you don't mind, you had mentioned before we go back to these charts, you had mentioned at one point when you really started going these after the cups and everything that you started making a device with some consenting, survivors that you work with and stuff to start kind of testing the influence on this just to see how much this can be effective when casually deployed on people.
Yeah, so it started out real simple with just the cardboard, and I wanted to be able to see how easily you could interact with people with words and color. Because I wanted to be correct. I didn't want to simply just say, I feel like I found something, and I'm sure someone else has already done this. I do that a lot. I keep things to myself and I don't share them. And then someone says, you should talk to someone about this. People might benefit from this, but I never believe them. And that's because with my training, I was made to believe that I was retarded. That's what it was called when I was younger. I was diagnosed mentally retarded, is what they made me. So probably the amount of drugs that they had a child on, but that could just be me. And so I took laminated, it was quite, again, elementary. I took colored paper and I would write the word of the color on the colored paper and then put it in this sleeve and go in public and have conversations with people that I thought might be mind controlled. And I would move about in such a way that it passes through their vision. Because I wanted to create an electronic device because I thought it would be easier than sliding a card in each time. I mean, I had to keep these things on my person and someone seeing me putting something in a cardboard piece on my arm under a shirt, it's not exactly glamorous. So
Right. And let me ask you this. Okay, because you were mentioning the device, and I've noticed certain like games that people use for split brain therapy and building kind of
yes,
brain power games to where they will have it to where it flashes words and it flashes colors, but say it will flash the word blue, but the word blue will be written in red. Does that make sense? And then it will do like vice versa.
yes,
So with that can kind of like
yeah.
surprise people and trick them, but like so you're essentially finding people, which I'm sure you're surrounded when you're coming out of mind control and testing this contraption to see if this is influencing them and so on and so forth.
Yes, yes, because they've got the blinking versus the not blinking, and the different symbolism that's in the background, like a swirl or something like that. So, as you said, if it had the the word blue, but it was the color red, if it was blinking, then it would be red is active in outer world. Blue gives the command to red. And so that's what it's saying. It's a direct message. And with this training, the internal parts, they know that. They know that. But there's a structure that's supposed to make it so that you cannot be aware of it. And it took a lot of work for me to figure it out. And I'm still figuring out a lot of the things that are going on. But yes, I use this piece of trash essentially that I've created, and I moved it past people's vision who I believe were mind controlled, and I saw common thing with individuals that were wearing pink. They would begin to give me, if I had purple, they would begin to give me their location, where they lived, where they went to church or work or something. They gave a bunch of information. And I thought, because I didn't understand why it was happening, it was happening over and over again. As I did the same thing, I even uh, I took it to clothing level where I had it. on my arm, and then I made my clothing the color of what I had on the wrist to try to see all the differences. There were many different times where people either had no reaction at all, and that was nice because it was obvious they were not mind controlled. But very often, the ones that were, if they had pink, they would begin to give a life story each time. Pink and purple, to give a life story. And I found that fascinating. And
Start to really feel like it's the Matrix.
yes, because it was cardboard, right? It was cardboard. It might as well, my littles might have well put it together and said, take that piece of trash and let's go play type of thing. And
So
uh, I was stuck.
you're waving just like a child's, contraption, and you're
Yes,
eliciting responses by kind of flash colors. It seems to be linked with mind control programming, and this is just a little contraption kind of experimenting and testing a hypothesis that is rooted in well-known color programming. Don't get me wrong. But
yes.
imagine if what you had done was integrated your little contraption test colors into, say, an intro to a movie with a spiral to help hypnotize them first, and then have the intros tend to
Exactly.
glow with certain colors. And I had heard you
Yeah.
speak on some of this and how it kind of, they get conditioned to where it preps and primes them to be receptive. Would you like to speak on that, about how that's kind of rolled into certain movies and intros?
Oh, yeah. I wanted originally, once I discovered all this, I had reporters that immediately wanted to take to media and begin a movie uh, channel where we go through movies and watch them together, but I describe the programming and decode it in each movie. Because at the very beginning of a movie, especially children's shows or a lot of movies, and actually anything in Hollywood, it'll start out with moon red or pink and orange. By the end of the movie, there will be purple and gold. Because, and you see this in Anon programs as well. The chip that they get, the last one is purple and gold. And there's the color-coded system with the Anon programs as well. And I've got my own opinion about how that's used to funnel systems into the drug rehab programs with a color coordinated setup via their chips and the handlers being able to be their sponsors. But the movies have they've got direct symbolism. I mean, if you're looking at the Matrix, you've got the red and the blue, you've got the rabbit on the shoulder. If we're looking at one of the most fascinating movies I think I saw recently was the Sonic movie. This movie was disturbing. How how much programming is in it? They have this blue character with red shoes. The red shoes, we obviously know what it's connected with, but it's also connected with the parts because the blue is the knowledge of the entire damaged body, and the red is what is done, the running, the fleeing, the passion, the the red shoe club. And in Sonic, in the movie, they they had there's always a series of programming in the Hollywood movies where someone gets sick because part of spinning program is the illness, obviously. Um, they've got the being an unpleasant smell because they've got to have the shame programming for the brown parts. brown parts are very connected with the um unaliving program. It's the O. I don't
Chain
think it's
reaction. We know. Yeah,
right.
we know.
Yeah, you understand which one it is. I don't think it's smart to say it out loud. But the brown parts are connected with that. And so in the Sonic movie, from start to finish, you get to see the sequence of the beginning of programming and the split, and then the training throughout in a coded symbolic way, all the way to the end of the switch coming out that triumphs and successfully does not remember. Because the white parts are used to recycle and hide memory, which is why angelic parts can feel so incredible, and the demonic parts are supposed to be the terror based of it. But what I say in each program, in each system, is that the demonic parts are the second betrayed to the child, who the child was supposed to be. And so the more angry parts you deal with, the more parts that are persecutors and being able to help them become protectors, the ones that you're the most afraid of, they've faced the most, felt the most, and are willing to challenge it even as the orange program goes off. There are parts that are opposite of that, and they simply will not, and they might even completely be unaware of how to do it at all because these things are reversed on purpose. But if you watch Hollywood movies, same with the movie Jim Carrey with him. I believe it was called Me, Myself, and Irene. Very beginning of the movie, he is wearing pink. When he gets hurt the most, he is wearing brown. When he is the one who is the most militaristic and rude, he is in green. And as it cycles through the movie, as he takes on hard, you get to see the different transitions. They know what they're doing because if they're training, if there's any kind of
Reinforcing.
training,
You
yes,
see it, though your programming becomes a reality when you see it externally. It's mirrored.
yes,
As above, so below. You have
yes,
your macrocosm, your microcosm, and it applies, and it is a chicken and an egg scenario.
yes, and it after a while it became so obvious to me because each thing I was watching, even with kids shows, they've got children's shows, and it's the same thing. The beginning, the red and the blue, and then the pink. And the Barbie movie, if you watch the Barbie movie, same thing. They even put it in your face because they know that people are not listening to the mind control concept. There's a part in the Barbie movie, and they literally name the one that gets trash can, the one that is not important, who has orange on her. Her name is Split. And
Ooh.
so in the very beginning, they've got a blue stick figure and an orange stick figure. And then there's a map behind them. They've got it right in people's faces and they know it. And it's so hard to explain. As I'm explaining it now, I've got internal system parts that are trying to silence me and
We
say,
appreciate you digging deep, and we appreciate all the
yeah,
parts because this is truly helping people.
yes. Oh, this is a good place to stand right here for a moment. So the green parts are going to be very connected with the deltas. They're the ones that can be moved around once the orange programming has gone off to an extent that's very severe. That's when the greens are sent out. And that's when you see things like a school shooters, you see bigger crimes, it's stuff like that. They use those parts for those types of things. And everyone is sort of given the
Hmm.
I don't know what's going on with the screen. Oh, there we go.
That's
I
my
don't know.
chart. It didn't
Right.
like your chart, my friend.
I suppose so. The
Uh,
I believe it's because we were sharing information that was
it's
too
okay.
severe there.
We'll
I
continue.
suppose.
I will get this fixed.
Anyway, the black parts. When people think of a system and they see the black cloaks, they see the black. Black scares children. It's as simple as that. They're the ones that are right by the. So the structure is it's going to go in a sequence like this. I'm going to give you a short. Let's have a scenario. You're in outer world. You're spending time with people. You hear a song. The song triggers some type of thought or feeling. You get a body memory, but you don't know what's really going on. You've got flashes of things, but you don't know what's really going on. The blue part is now being instructed internally to find the part to bring to the outer world depending on who's around you. So if your handler's around you and they're trying to activate you, depending on what they want, then the black part will be close by. They're directly connected with threats, most verbal threats, the insults that you experience, the ways that you're doing everything wrong, the shame, the guilt, that's them. They're very connected with that. And this activates the brown. And the brown will, they live in a timeline that is trapped in pain and loss and shame. And what systems need to understand is that for an average individual that is not mind controlled, they don't have something suspended in one timeline based on an event. That's how a split works. It's a timeline, a neural pathway that is looped in a timeline with its own understanding of its own world and life. So as the body continues, this part that is from this timeline of beliefs has to coexist with whatever it is they're experiencing from the outside world, while knowing that the rule is don't remember, don't tell. So when you work with brown parts, treat it like little. Brown parts will not feel better. And I know that's very difficult to hear, but they won't. They're not designed to. If you could take the worst things that have happened to you in your entire life and you could put them on replay and never stop them, that is what a brown part is designed to be. So they could be irritated, they could be upset, more pain, more somatics. Those are the times when you really need to slow down, not try to make urgent decisions, and be willing to give yourself time and healing way faster. The brown parts are not, in my opinion, to be messed with. And persecuted red ones and purple ones will be the most likely to be used. Purple will be used to influence substances, which is supposed to harm the body, which terrifies the brown parts. the reds will be used for sexual behavior, impulsive, um, co- compulsive masturbation, compulsive sexual activity, because of the things that have been used. This affects the brown parts. It cycles like that, and those are going to be your demons, your persecuted. It's how it's going to be treated that way, and that's why it'll go right back to blue, right back to white, and you'll see that each time: pink, blue, white. And so as the purple, red, brown cycles with all the pain and the despair and the underworld, essentially, the yellow and the green, it's going to be the feeling of the controlling of time in combination with hypnosis. And these are the parts that are connected with drugs. So they are in a constant state of understanding what's going on, but they're drugged, and the parts that are in the red, purple, and brown, they're in a constant state of action that is moving the body, taking a substance, influencing a fight, damages, spending, sexual behavior, and all of these things are trained. There's a whole process, a timeline that they do this training, and I made a chart to sort of break it down. I think it was the one you had before.
Yeah, and apologies for the technical difficulties. Hooked up another device because my devices completely went haywire in the middle of this presentation. So I'm getting used to moving around. Is this the chart that you want or the next one?
I believe it's the one that was before. No.
Oh, here, oh, oh, this one?
This one. Yes.
There we go.
So, so you've got the child, newborn to 4 years old. This is when you're going to be teaching how to control the different histamine. Because what you do have to understand, along with how elementary color programming is, the other part of it that's elementary is that all they've got to do is interact with either inducing, lessening, or damaging the effects with uh, oxytocin, adenosine receptors, cortisol, and adrenaline. So if you want to control a human, you need those four things. So they start that out at the very beginning. They have the child create the inner world. They study what they're capable of. And when a child does not have a prefrontal cortex, they're not capable of rationale. This means that they can have interrupted object permanence. This is when they're going to see ghosts, demons, gods, spirits, angels as real. They can be convinced of all this stuff, which is why when you've got
They
infant
believe Santa.
parts,
This is when they believe Santa is
yes,
real when they're taught.
yes,
This is a crucial developmental stage in occult path working where they are doing specific things, many very torturous, to affect someone to make them a mind control subject continued into adulthood.
yes. And they're also testing what kind of features does this child have? How do they respond to dopamine, serotonin? How do they respond to cortisol? Um, how much pain can they handle? What's the structure of their muscular and bone? How do they scar? What kind of illness? They are testing to see, can this child be a soldier? Can this child be academic or intellect or a leader
Absolutely.
or something like that? They're looking
And a
for
lot
these
of these
things.
places like daycares, for example, that will be hooked up with these programming sites. They'll be ran on grants, and these grants, part of them accepting this money is, agreeing to apply these certain testing scales to the kids that are there, such as the Wechsler, individual tests that start,
Yes.
at 2, and obviously they have things not on the books. But yes, and we greatly appreciate you supplying these charts. Obviously, through the quick translation that I have done, you see, like at the bottom should be distort logic, and it's distraught. So you
Yes.
have a lot of that, but you went to a lot of work. This was a lot of charts to convert, so we did the best we could on the notice that we did. They can be corrected, and these are monumental. So again, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes. And again, I made these because I was studying my own system when I was in therapy, the DID. Um, the individual started to have handler behavior and try to interact with the people that were around me. My therapy suddenly became a reason for the therapist to try to get to know the people in my life, the people that were in the home. And I said that that was very strange. And this began to happen over and over again. And I noticed that each of these types that was working with systems, they were very focused on letting specific things go and not allowing demon parts to be a reality. It was, they made you believe that the demons were real, but somehow it wasn't that with angelic. Somehow it wasn't that with spiritual and religious. It wasn't, they made you believe in angels. They made you believe in spirits. It was, they made you believe in demons. And so I was not accepting of this because I quite like to study the dichotomy of things. And those parts are very important in systems. The black and white. The black is threat, telling you all the things wrong. The white is what about the correct thing, the things that are going well, which is why they can so easily ease the memory away because it's easy for the brown parts to be able to feel everything leave. And sometimes it's going to be very beneficial to you to not need to uncover memory. Sometimes that will be the case. If you're in a dangerous enough state, whenever I speak with victims, I say the same thing. If you don't have privacy, if you don't have a home that is safe away from the abusers, if you still live around or with any of the perpetrators, you cannot do system work the same. You cannot unfold these things the same.
You're not safe.
Because,
You have to be safe.
yes, they are waiting. They they use color programming and all these things as a way to study what the child might be learning as they get older. They don't want them to get memory, so they've got methods to figure out, are they starting to get memory? Are they starting to figure things out?
Exactly. And a
So,
lot of this, like you say, some of this isn't mental illness and it goes into business, but, because this is
yes,
mental defense and it's defense because
yes,
if you're in a dangerous situation and so on and so forth. But yeah, and of course, obviously at the developmental phase especially, it is crucial to lay down that foundation to where these children were in these rooms that were these colors and had these things happen. So it's just so strongly
yes,
associated. It's just like if you accidentally slam your finger in the car when you close the door, you're like, oh, you're going to be real careful for a while when you go to close that door. Well, if when you were a baby, before you remember, you were tortured in a certain color room, that's going to stick with you for life, and it's very hard to undo. But you start becoming conscious of how certain things affect you and become aware, more deliberate, and you can retrain and regrow and change into a healthy behavior, as
yes,
much as possible, and that's what this is about, and so again, I
which is
greatly appreciate
why
you going into this.
when they reinforce it in music and movies and shows and clothing and events, these things, they have to. they're slaves to their own work. Because if systems start to become not activated, if they are not traumatized, the thing that you need to understand as a system is that the one job that these individuals have who've created this is to keep you traumatized so that you focus on the new trauma instead of your memory. They don't
Yes,
want
and
you to feel good enough. Yes,
it
that's
maintains those
why
pathways as well. Yes, the walls.
that's why so many homeless are systems. Because if they stay on drugs, if they stay a mockery, if they stay homeless, if they stay unwell, they will be so barely alive and they will be in a world all the time that the public will see them as crazy, but they will not be facing memory. And you said yourself, Gray, that when you got time to be alone for once is when you did the most work with your system.
Oh yes, remove the responsibility and everything. But when I got time alone to truly face myself, without substances, without anything to keep me busy, without a phone to scroll, right? All I had
Yes,
was all I had was to sit in what I was, what I had, and to face it. And it was
yeah,
and it was painful, but it was a million pounds off my shoulders once I really finally dug in and faced what I had been running from in so many ways without even realizing I was running from it. They say the body keeps the score, and it's funny because it does. And it was I was just keeping myself in a state of hypervigilance, jumping around, looking around like a squirrel. But yeah,
yeah,
finally I settled down and faced it.
yeah. So the newborn to 4 years old, I think it was,
Hmm.
um, going back to that, that is when the sex and death training. So if you can get a child to believe in magic and Santa and which is a very big part of programming, if you can get them to believe in these things and disrupt their object permanence, because children deserve object permanence to be their own exploration. They deserve that what you say is in front of them to be the truth. And when you're doing mind control tactics on people, when you catch someone at a young enough age that they cannot differentiate between the object permanence, then the sex and death training makes them makes the part believe that they have died. There are parts that believe that they are not alive,
Oh
or
yeah.
that the and that is the first thing that they do. When they do the first split, there is the part that is allowed to carry all the information of what went on, but not know how it feels, so it doesn't matter. And then there are the other parts that experience only how it felt as a threat to if they learn what what the other knows. And once it comes together, that's when it sets off the orange and it no, that part died. I died a long time ago. You'll meet a lot of systems that will say that they're aliens, they're not from this world, they're dead,
Hmm.
things like that. It's because they were affected at this age with that training. And that
Absolutely.
alone is coded speech to handlers and abusers. That's why they really like to make these movies and enforce these things because it tells them they've done a fantastic job of doing their mind control programming. They see it as a great thing to themselves. It's a study to them.
Those in
And
the
then you get
know, the adept, can pick up the
yes,
tells on everybody. Absolutely, and they revel in it.
yes, yes. And so as you reach 4 to 12 years old, this is when they start to train. So if they've trained the job at the very beginning, they've trained the jobs. Now the pods know this is what you do, this is what you don't do, this is what happens, this is who's watching you, and so on. When they get to this age, it becomes now this is how we're going to use our new skill. We're going to practice our new skills. So they practice what is going to be an activation with cortisol, what's going to be an activation with serotonin and dopamine, oxytocin. They use mazes and amusement parks, events to test memory and see which parts are going to be able to do more lying, which parts are going to be loyal, which parts are leaders, which parts are
Yes.
going to be able to be handlers. They're testing the child to
Yes.
see each color too.
And they've
It,
made
like
the
it's hard.
foundation. They've made
Yeah,
the
it
foundation in the previous years. Now they're really testing reliability and thresholds, limits. What can these parts
yeah,
do? What is motivating these parts? What, we're manipulating them, attachment syndrome, this and that, cortisol activation, serotonin and dopamine. We are seeing how this person is best feels rewarded, what motivates this person, what drives them, and really getting down to continue to utilize them on through life.
yes. And so you might experience that there are a lot of parts that will be adults or thousands of years old or from another dimension or something like that. And when people say, when a therapist especially says, well, these are all children that are suffering, and each of them is a little, each of them is young. It offends the littles because, first of all, that breaks the rule of don't remember, don't tell. So you have to be willing to suspend that. But because therapists are trained by the same government that is mind controlling and trafficking children, they get used as a monitor system to activate more systems so that the pink part comes out, shares a bunch of things about the personal life, and they can keep track, and then the handlers that are involved can navigate things that way based on a legal medical record. You were able to see this with Britney Spears. That's a very good example of how it was successful. Marilyn Monroe was the same thing. She was never allowed to drive. She was watched everywhere she went. Same with Michael Jackson. He created his inner world in his home to be able to meet his little needs, but it was used against him in the public. But the 4 to 12 years olds is the reward and punish testing because this is when children are going to start to try to push more. They expect more. So praise is important and punishment just the same. So they're still being trained in horrific ways and they're being trafficked during all of this because they've got to be sold and trained at the same time for things to work, all the while going to school. So what I hear from systems often is there's no way that this could have happened because I was in school. Well, they'll take the body somewhere else, they'll do specific things, and then they can get rid of the memory and put the child back in school and then they say that to the part that needs to remember, especially the blue, this is where you were, this is the floor plan, this is your teacher, you know
Cover
all of
story.
these specific things. It's very direct.
Cover
And so,
story.
yes, it upsets the parts that don't associate with that, which is often floaters and the ones that were trashed. Because the ones that are rebellious, they cause the most problems. And that's why I can make these charts. Because what happened with me is that these individuals, it was clear that I meant nothing. So they did so much to the point that they pumped me full of drugs, sent me all these different places, had me testing in all these different facilities, and basically expected me to not be able to survive each time. But as I did survive, they would be shocked and then they would praise a specific part. But the part that I am was disgusted with many things, and so I would be thrown in the trash, quite frankly, with a trash full of dead infants. They had me lay with my dead mother and make me believe that I was spending time with her. So I believe that good women were quiet women because she was dead and I was too young to know that she was dead. So I thought that mothers were a certain skin color. I thought that they were a certain behavior. I thought they were all quiet. They never spoke to you. This messed with my programming in a very specific way. And so it caused a lot of problems for me because when my trainers were trying to work with me, they had no sense of nurturing whatsoever. And so there was nothing to be praised by. I didn't experience the understanding of praise. And part of mind control is that you need the balance. You need some praise. You need the parts to be able to feel like they're cared about, and you need the parts that experience the absolute opposite of that and shame and guilt and all that, because the internal war is very important. And I've heard many systems, they've got their own thing that each system has my abusers messed up in this specific way. That's why I'm able to have these floaters of whatever it is. It's different for each system, but for me, what I experienced is that each time they were trying to make split, because I had gone through the severity of what had happened each time, I kept coming out. So as they would make a split, I would end up out, which would make them very mad, and they would trash me each time. And there would be different splits that would split with me and so on. But each time I began to collect the manual of what they were doing because I kept splitting with everyone. And
You
it
were
was,
merging.
it was, yeah, it was verbally, they were becoming very verbally upset, but they had invested so much time and money and people were involved that for some reason they kept the body alive. And once I figured that out, which was very difficult to figure out, and I never was able to know whether it was true or not that I was valuable at all. But I decided, regardless, to understand what these people were doing, if that's all I was going to be doing was being trashed and then coming out to something terrible and experiencing a new scar and new damages, whatever it was, surgery in the face, some type of hanging by hooks. It was, they were trying everything. And so as I got out, uh, away from all of them, that's when I started to build these charts. And I started to notice, oh, they need to build a structure at the very beginning to create all the threats. Then they need to train all of the academic skills. They need to do all of the mind control specific jobs. And then they need to play with their toy. And so by the teenage years is when they try to play. They try to see if their toy works because they created something. They want to see if it's functional the way they want. That's why puberty and teenage years, they come with a lot of confusing things and shame. And when I speak with teen parts, they're very complex to interact with because they've got very passionate feelings. It's as if during those years, the blue parts are sort of hidden in the background. They're allowed to watch. They're allowed to see if anything is disrupting. but the red can go wild and do red and purple and brown, black. They can do many things, and the pink will always report back. And so they're testing to see if their toy works. Build um, obsessive dopamine and serotonin loyalty, selective. Um, what does that say? Selective.
I have to look back at the chart.
Yeah,
My device, of course, started malfunctioning here.
yeah. Selective memory training, punishment and placement in jobs. So teenage years is when they start to really say, you need to do something with your life. Now, they know that they're speaking to multiple parts. They know which parts to bring out easily. I've known systems that they ended up in a facility. It's usually around ritual days, holidays, birthdays, something like that. They end up in a facility, which these hospitals expect more people around this time. And they were given coloring books with exact imagery that was from the childhood. I
Oh,
believe one of them was Power Rangers. They used an exact color, they used exact numbers. They had music playing in the room, and it made the little, because littles know the hospital is the place to tell everything. If you're being taken to the hospital, if you're being taken to the authorities, the littles know that is where you speak,
yeah.
and that is the pink and the yellow and purple. And they skew the body image and prepare them. Yes, this is academic, breeder, and crime. So at this point, they're trying to figure out, based on the parts that have been present, the abusers are figuring out which parts are going to be best for where I want them to go. So this purple part, they're really good with music. They attract a lot of women. This is great. I'm going to have them learn to hide cameras in the bathroom or something like that. Get them into computer programming so they become talented and effective at what they do. And they lure people, but they're also doing different jobs. With Breeder, those parts are usually pinks and purples, and red is used to assault, and they've got the red rooms that get used. It's supposed to create the thematic, usually a threat. That's why BDSM is heavily involved in these kinds of things. The red will also be involved with crime as well. The foundation between purple, red, black, and pink are very common when they're used with the jobs between the crime and breeder. The green and the blue are going to be used for more academic themes, as well as the gray. Gray is very focused on intaking information. They are very connected with bot parts. They're very good at collecting information. They tend to work under the blue and white parts. And if you get them on your team, they have a they essentially collect a wealth of knowledge. They have massive files and computers of information, and they might not really know how it feels, but they're a good part to have on your team if you can get access to them. There are some parts that simply will not be emotional, and therapy tries to create the idea that every part can change into what is societally acceptable. but there are some parts that just do not. When you want to do work with brown parts, say, those are the very somatic ones. When you suspend the need to tell them what to look forward to or that things will get better, they actually feel better because that is the truth. That things are difficult, that things are terrible, that they're in pain, that it's unfair, that this is angry, that this is wrong. Stick to those topics with brown parts specifically, because all the other parts are designed to say uplifting things. But if you take a child that's been trapped in a cellar and you leave them there and you walk by the door and you tell them you'll be getting out, they've not seen proof of it yet. Eventually, they don't listen to you at all. And that's how the brown parts are. Now, the ones that are in higher up, the dark blue and the dark red, these are elders, and they're going to be connected with the dark purple and the gold. And the elders, they essentially run things from the middle. They send out for specific jobs, and they will mimic and look identical to the abusers that the body had seen or who was allowed to be allowed to be seen or heard. So in my case, there were some individuals that were very good within the CIA that wore silicone masks, very high quality ones. So as a very young and impressionable infant, the faces as I got older, the faces simply were just what I was able to see of the masks, which is why they do this with alien masks as well. If they can get children from schools to believe that they've had alien abductions, you'll see a lot of systems that will have nightmares where they were abducted by aliens. This is because these individuals can wear costumes and masks. The costume and mask parts, more often than not, are going to be connected with your elders. They're going to have the most likely appearance of people that exist in the outer world. And this is used to get the body framed and create problems. If you've watched any of the stuff with Gray's work, you probably know how often he is drastically attacked by people that are very uneducated, or they're educated in a way that they're trying to keep this business running. And so they will be a lot like elders. They will orchestrate the direction of systems and parts to respond a specific way. But they've all got in a system, no alter is a bad alter. And that's very difficult for people to handle because it's so easy when you get to see the things that you do internally, externally, whatever it is, it's so easy to say this alter does and says these vile things, therefore they are this, or they look like the individual that assaulted me and drugged me, therefore they're evil. But they have been told, essentially, if you can imagine this for a second, and I'm going to make a chart of it to make it make more sense. You've got an individual who is the real criminal, the adult. in a costume, and they're looking down at the infant body that is you. The transfer from the infant into inner world becomes the costume of that outer world abuser, and that creates an elder in inner world to take on that and to take on that role. And that child sees everything that that individual does, and they know the job, they know what they're told, and they live as that in a hierarchical state. And then in inner world, it they look down at little, which become the other parts, the splits that are in the system. So even though it is the same body and the same brain, they transfer things based on what the child is seeing in the outer world, which is why they can use screen, they can use actual theater, they can use actual situations with the abusers. They can take the body and do take the body all over the place to other countries. Many systems would say that they've been outside of America and they will not be believed. And this is because it's very easy to take a private jet somewhere, do training for a week or a couple days, train specific parts, and then bring them back and have that memory hidden. And so elders know that there's a hierarchy to assist in keeping those secrets, and they've been rewarded to keep those secrets, but it doesn't make them evil. It just makes them unaware of their job. And the way to help systems the most is if you can get even one or two parts, usually persecuted, to become protected. If you can get someone to become outraged by the treatment without needing to, with a sense of urgency, report to the outside world, if you can keep it in a journal, you can have safe privacy, you can do study structures at home, and the way that they put it in, you go looking similarly from the spectrum of care and safety and healing. Each part will have their own skill set, and you can study what's going to come in handy to be able to get through your own memory. And it's going to be a lot. It's going to be overwhelming, the amount of parts, the amount of memories. But it's very important. And when I work with systems sometimes, I will say reverse program has no say so over what I think, feel, say, or do. And that works as a tool because there are parts that are designed to reverse the things that you say. So, as Gray said in the very beginning, don't be scared. Do not report. Do not do this. There are parts internally that reverse that. And so it's a command to do the opposite. And what is important to do when you're working with a system is for each thing that you say as a command, you say, reverse program has no say so over what I think, feel, say, or do. This becomes a command that the internal parts have not heard, and so they don't know what to do with it. They just know that you understand something and they're listening now. Because if you've got the attention of multiple parts at once, you can add structures to the inside of inner world and reshape it instead of have one or two parts that are hearing you. Meanwhile, the others are blind or deaf or mute. It, accessing two main parts can begin the structure of deconstructing of a lot of the programming and build your own programs. So many people are afraid of that word, programming. So they don't think I could reprogram my way, my own inner world, my way. So that's what reverse programming can do. And you can help other systems in a severe way by not being affected by their programming. I cannot tell you how many systems I've worked with where I've said, you can be angry all you like, and I realize you have psychic energy and you came from the underworld and you're demonic force and Luciferian, whatever it is you say you are, I believe you are, but I need you to understand that your inner world is not mine. And so the way that your elders have affected you, even though there's similarities in the structure of how programs are built, you will not have the same thing that I do. And it can be down to the flavors of something, the sound of of whatever song it's on, a smell. It's the brain is so fascinating that way that your hypothalamus collects all the information about all of what your senses have collected. And this is where the blue parts come in handy because they have that huge collection. And that's why the handlers go to them for that information. They go to the pink part because they know that the pink part is going to get information from the blue part without realizing it. They're going to call it thought, while the blue part's going to call it expression and reporting. That's just how they understand it because that's how they've been trained.
And whatever exactly is identified with is going to be the terminology, and there'll be themes, but there's little differences for each person for however they
Exactly.
exactly latched on, because although there is, a general recipe, it's individualized and anchored into individual psyches. Everybody isn't an individual, and everybody that's programmed is programmed individually.
Yes. Which is why, very much like an allergy, if you have an allergy, but someone else does not, you can consume whatever it is that they can. And the littles in systems, when they realize the things do not work the same way for everyone, because they've been lied to. Above all, systems have repeatedly had children in them that have been lied to. And the main lie is that you'll never get away, no one will ever listen, um, and that this everyone knows what you've done, everyone knows how you look, how you smell, what you do in private. All those different lies have been placed in each system as a way to create a lot of shame. And threshold is what I would call it because they're not doing anything impressive. They're simply bringing the brain to a level of crisis that gets rid of the prefrontal axis and only has access to the amygdala, which is connected with all of the programming that goes through the hypothalamus. And if they have parts that are directly connected with the hypothalamus, that part can send out directions based on the senses and the data that is connected with each of those senses. Oh, I smelled that. That equals death. This part, go do this. It's really that simple.
Absolutely, and they're training children from young. That's what you said is so important. That none of these parts are bad. This is something
Yes,
that a child had to adapt in its environment. It was the only solution to continue forward. in the environment that this child was in. And that's what the child did what it had to. These are not bad parts. There is none of that. These are parts that had the only response possible for the stimuli that it's experiencing. Okay, it's extreme experience, and it is a logical response, really, when you get down to it, to just such an extreme experience. So for whatever the part is, as many parts as they are, as complicated as it is, whatever you were taught when you were young, whatever function, under whatever conditioned stimuli response sequence, whatever post hypnotic suggestion was implemented, you have to get knowing yourself, never judge yourself, allow yourself to feel, and allow yourself to just just you have to adjust your expectations. That's a lot of it. It's such a great thing if you know what you're dealing with and you say, okay, I'm going in on a rescue mission. Like you said, the alarm's going to be going off, the sprinklers going. It's mayhem, but we need to get in, right? We need to go in, get the guys, make sure they're doing this to save
Yes.
us, and maybe change some jobs, change some assignments, and, take over this building, make sure it's safe, reinforced, and then make sure everybody's doing what we need to do to work, for the here and now, not for what we had to do when we were born, when we were a kid being tortured. We need to relearn new behaviors, new things to adapt to the here and now. So we have to go on a rescue mission on ourselves. There's no time to judge ourselves. There's no time for anything. And I need to touch on something that you really were drilling in here, and that is how, this has been infected as a business into our institutions, to where they're pushing these structures into all autists, all LGBTQ, all furries and Therians. They're taking people where, sure, there are some extreme random natural things and illnesses and chemical imbalances, but we're talking about people getting programmed, and they are creating whole genres such as Therians, okay? Therians and furries, okay? To where they're
Yes.
slightly different, but it's basically animal play. But there's a spectrum, right? And obviously some can get sexual, some can go to a full identity. This is the sort of thing where it's like, oh, I identify as he, she, I identify as this, oh, use my pronouns. Okay, well, you have to understand that when that started rolling out, the people that were known as multiple personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder, dissociative disorder not otherwise specified, other, dissociative disorder, whatever you want to call it, non-specified dissociative disorder, they started feeling mocked when everybody's like, oh, I identify as this, I identify as this. This is by design. It's so people, they're just normalizing it. They can't get the help they need. They're misdiagnosed. They'll never be able to turn for help. And, and then also you have other groups of people that see it as ridiculous and just mock it because they can sense there's something wrong with it, but they don't attribute to something wrong being the actual system, that it's a systemic problem, and realize that the individuals are actually victims. They have been abused. Even the sign for it, theta delta, like, come on, like, this is in your face.
Yes.
And then again, we're going to the infinity. We're going to, what you're going to
Yeah.
always see
I'm
is you're going
over
to see
here.
this nexus. You're going to see this nexus. And then what do you see on the different sides is you see the blue, the red. I mean, this is played out. We're not going to go into the gate with the steam and the stem and the color coding, the movies, everything. But long story
It's a
short,
lot.
you'll see it's all the same. It all
Yes.
mirrors back. It is
Well,
mind
and
control that has been weaved into every aspect of culture and society. So it's automated extremely on individuals, but passively to the masses. And it is implemented now to such a degree that it's scary. And we need to come together, heal ourselves and the people, unfortunately, that were under such individual direct mind control conditioning. It's almost up to us to free the external people while we're being heckled for it. So that's where
yeah,
we're at. It is what it is.
and I
It's
mean
ridiculous.
that's
Um,
good to go into the animal training because when children are young, their first kill usually is an animal, and that's part of the training. Can they kill? Will they kill an animal? Will they kill a person? And so on. And those that are really good at it, and those that are okay with it, they don't have the empathy, then they get to be sociopathic, psychopathic, they get to pass almost as the Joker. those that are stressed and don't want to do it, they get punished, they get made into weakness. When I speak with systems that did not pass the testing, so to speak, for being okay with killing, what I notice the most is that when you speak with a system that is offended or defensive, feeling as though they are weak because they did not pass the military testing or they were not chosen, they will get offended about uh defensive with you. You think that you're Delta, this and that. It's because they're practically telling you that they have programming, even by speaking this way, because those that have casually been able to take a life in the beginning of training, this does not even cross their minds to feel ashamed of not being able to do something.
The
They feel
sentiment is coming from a place. The sentiment's not
yeah,
materialized from thin air. No, absolutely. And
yeah.
everybody
So
has their individual.
there's different parts, and each system has different puzzle pieces. There might be systems that have far more active healers and caretakers. So even though all of these different trainings have been in each system because they're testing to see what's going to work, what's not going to work, if you've got a system that's just more often caretakers at the front, it does not make you weak. It does not mean that the teenage parts that were forced to be put into killer situations and they want to be recognized for their violence and their hatred, which they do. They want to be seen as they have things they can fight about or whatever it is. They deserve to be acknowledged for the things they experience the way they need it to be experienced, with a rule set out, obviously. No danger to the body, no substance to the body, no harm to others. There's a structure, there's a rule that still has to be built. But because the animal is the first kill, the animal training, and in my opinion, the Therian training, the child must see an animal suffer. This is the assignment. And so the training is, will you kill? Will you save? This creates the alter design to cause things suffering. The child must be given a pet to care for. Will you kill? Will you save? And the alter that is designed is to create the feeling of caring for others at their expense. There's the child must feel unable to care about an animal. This creates the altar designed for apathy, meant not to be able to take care of living things. So you can have a single parent that doesn't know how to take care of a child. This is because they activate breeder, and then the breeder gives them access to the child. They set up the whole court system, and so the woman or whoever it is will lose their child because the alter that is fronting is the one who is designed to not know how to care. The assignment is something needs to break bonds, and the alter for that is the alter that cannot emotionally connect with love and affection. They will be connected with um, deep pain. For me, they connected it with the removal and the drilling of the teeth. They used tools and things and destroyed my teeth and my mouth and forced me to say I love you with a mouth full of blood while playing the Pete Dragon movie, where he says strange things with his mouth because he's the dragon that makes the strange sounds. And the child says, I love you too. This was to create a training so that there would be a hatred for when people said that and a deep pain connected with it. Just as an example, I realize that's graphic, but that's was the case. And so the other assignment is the child that wants to save an animal. The training is, will they save it? Will others kill it? Which they set that up. This creates the altar that rescues everyone. The child that wants to hurt the animal. This creates the altar that endangers people or has criminal training, desires to harm. The child that becomes sexual with the animal or around an animal. This is the altar of focus on selling self and others. And the crime performance product, the altar that is terrified of punishment due to watching animals suffer. And so the Therians, when you see the Therians and the furries, when you're dealing with a system, someone who has an animal identity and becomes dysphoric, that is a word to pay attention to. And I know that this is going to deeply upset the LGBTQA. I know this is going to upset those that are a part of the furry community. But what needs to be understood is that we are talking about ritual abuse and mind control. And if you're not a part of ritual abuse and mind control, you've got no business watching this video in the first place. So jog on. But if you do have something to do with mind control and DID, then you you will have these thoughts. You will, because it's a part of training. Whether you've seen it or not, it's in there. And these are the beasts. This is where the teeth is. They will be the persecutors that guard a lot of memory. They'll be connected with um beast training and the demonic training, the threat of hell, the threat of death, all of that type of thing. And so the furries community, which is a very young community now, very young, um, handlers and pedophiles are targeting this area to be able to find groups online full of these children that are dressing this way, that are interested in these things. And the number one word to look out for when it comes to pronouns, when it comes to body, when it comes to parts that don't identify as human, and when it comes to Therians, is dysphoria. They utilize that word in the public as a trigger warning to make people feel like it is discrimination on the same basis as something like racism. And the reality is that it is a foundation for mind control.
And at the same time, the predators are well aware that this community of Therians, what it's filled with, and that they prey on that and
Yes.
insert themselves all in the different communities specifically to prey on these people. In a similar manner that happens with these anti-child trafficking organizations. The people, your layman, doesn't want to have that in their face and deal with the horrors. So the people that are involved with it are either people that are just so against it, or people that actually want to be there to protect themselves, to have victims come to them, to insert themselves into it, to control the situation, to get paid for it. Do you see what I'm saying? And actually enjoy being around that sort of thing. So it's a skewed situation, because even this sort of field, you don't really have that many people that have the experience with it to like know exactly what's going on, to want to combat it enough, to where really you have a bunch of people don't know exactly what's going on, or kind of going around with the system. People know it's not exactly right but don't know how to handle it, and meanwhile you have kids being encouraged to explore this sort of play and being educated with leading education. You have certain keywords being used to basically encourage the look of discrimination if you voice any concerns with it, and then you have a group of predators that knows exactly what's going on, and are using it as a system to exploit. And it's just
Yes.
disgusting. And thank you so much
Absolutely.
for really laying this out and laying out all these charts that are in depth, and we're going to make these charts
Yes,
available, and I would like to have more future conversations with you and break some of this down more in depth. But you have provided
yes,
such an amazing talk and framework about the importance and foundation of color in programming and how it's just affecting us passively and directly, really getting to know yourself, and any being prepared for any urgency, any rush of feelings when this is going on, getting to know these systems, these reporting systems, or these spinning somatic pain sensation feelings that
yes,
may release with some of this, and just kind of adjusting our expectations, knowing, hey, we're going into a burning building to put out the fire, to get these people out. We're going to experience this. Let's adjust those expectations, know what we're dealing with, not judge any of these parts, not judge ourselves. Just get in here, heal, grow, heal, change in the way we need to adjust for the here and now, not the then and there when we were children being tortured in these programs.
yes.
If,
And
if you would,
listening to parts when they say if they are not human, if they are adults, if you've got a therapist that needs your part to be seen as a little because it was a child that was abused as they see it, you will not be able to do deprogramming. You've got to allow the parts the autonomy, the choice, and the freedom to be who they say they are, and let it slowly earn trust. If you try to force things, you are no different than the perpetrators. And they've got to be able to mix that up and take the time, which is why privacy and comfort in your own home, being away from the abusers, very important. When I was cut off from the ability to have access to the right brain, because they will do that if you start to do too much. Suddenly, you cannot be creative, you cannot draw, you cannot write, you cannot do these things, you don't have access to your skills. I was trained to be very performative. I was trained to go many places and be a part of many different fields because they wanted the genes specifically. And it really is a eugenics thing that they're focused on, which is very annoying. But anyway, I used my home in a way where I split the room down the middle and I used a curtain and I said, this side of the room is the right brain, this side is the left. And when I used the information, the alters naturally would go to whatever side was connected with the colors that coincided with those things. And I began to create a brain inside a physical realm in the outer world via my home. And at any point in time, I could move the curtain and it could become a room again where I could be 100% an outer world instead of studying the different parts of the brain. And I had to be willing to understand that with the programming, because it will be very strong, with the programming that sets off Orange all the time, that is how you know you are constantly deprogramming. The Orange will not fuck off, quite frankly. And what I had to learn is to not wear it, to not be around it, to not be involved with it. If it was in my home, it would be used as a way to help me understand where I was. And that's why when they can't get you to interact with color specifically, then they try to use symbolism. So they'll use a tiger, they'll use striped things, and the stripes are supposed to remind brown parts of jail, cages, anything that's a striped animal, anything that's striped clothing. It's supposed to make parts feel the understanding of the symbolism of being in cages or being in prison. It's there on purpose, and it'll come out with Alice programming because the stripes are supposed to make them feel the same way that they were when they were caged. And Alice programming is a entirely different thing, which is, as I said, Walt Disney created the movie in 1951, which is 1 year after MK Ultra. So that's
Oh,
pretty
yes.
obvious, very
Weaved in
obvious.
and reinforcing with the times
Yes,
as they have been doing.
yes. But
I
the orange is very helpful. So if you, as who you are, just so happen to basically not get this damn color to get out of your sight, out of yeah, out of your mind, and it create. You'll get every somatic, everything at once. You'll be attacked the most. The most undesirable is anyone who has this color that is flashing, that is in their face. So if if you sense it, reverse programming has no say so over what I say, think, feel, or do, but just treat it like a very obvious alarm that's going off. Because what's really happening is the perpetrator's files are on fire. Their stuff is burning down. That's why the alarms are going off. It's not because anything is wrong with you. It's because their shit is being found out. And the system is very aware that that's against the rules. And so you become a door. This is when Alice program becomes very strong because that's what causes spinning. So this is when who you are as a part almost become like a door. And you become a door that all the other parts can go in and out of. Into the outer worlds, back in, influencing, coming out, coming in. And that's why I did the split of the rooms, because I needed to learn what parts were coming out here and what were they doing. And when I started to do that, then I started to fall asleep multiple times throughout the day because I was starting to figure out things. So you cannot uphold a job, you cannot drive if you're falling asleep. Certain things that they set you up for so that the public can see that you need medical attention. This is somatic. This is not medical attention.
digging deep
So
down, digging deep down in
yes,
these programs when they do the deepest programming, they're putting you in near death or actual
absolutely.
technical death states. And, it can elicit some things. So when you're really digging and freeing yourself, yeah, there is going to be an inherent level of destabilization. And there are things you're just going to have to, in some situations, let yourself go through. That's why it's important not to judge yourself. You have to recognize this, how even some of the basic things are used, and observe patterns. You'll notice some people, when they start really approaching deep systems, they'll start recognizing patterns, and then some people say, "Oh, they're schizo, this and that," right?
Yes.
But some of these patterns they start recognizing it's because these patterns were used and constantly reinforcing, and they're putting it together, but it's so much and they don't have context. It's the same thing with color. So when you're approaching this, you really just drop everything, take a new perspective where you are just observing to reactions, feelings, everything, and watching yourself like you're studying another animal. And you will start to see how things are affecting your behavior and be able to free yourself. And
Well, and
I greatly
if
appreciate everything you've done here. You know, uh,
yeah,
go ahead
if
and
you
if
can,
you got some closing
if it's
thoughts for them,
possible,
if you've got some
if it's
closing thoughts for
possible,
these people freeing themselves and
yeah,
on the whole thing, and I'd love to have you back for another conversation and going over some more of this.
yeah, yes. If it is possible, I know that it's very difficult, but if it's possible that you own a home or you own a place that has multiple rooms, if you can make those rooms custom to the parts and their needs, you can do massive amounts of deprogramming. You will learn based on the colors that are in there, the things that are allowed to be there. Because when they do these trainings, they use places that have different themed places, different themed rooms, and parts know they never escape from that one place. They're not allowed to leave. And so in Innerworld, it'll look like a whole planet, but it's just a room. It's just a room. And that's why they use hotels as well. The 13th story is not allowed to be touched. Why? Because they say that the suspicious, whatever it's called, superstitious. And the reality is that they use the 13th story of hotels. They make themes of each of the rooms, and they have parts go from place to place. They do it in hotels. They do it with amusement parks. They use after hours at amusement parks. They use haunted houses. The exact same thing. They're using resources all around you to create these what the pots know as planets or worlds. So there will be an inner world. And if they make a small thing, if it's just a bed, I spoke to a system where it was just the bed. It was a bed and there was a canopy over it. But in inner world, that bed was a planet. And so everything that those parts knew of demonstrated everything that was on that bed. And eventually, when the parts were able to get enough memory, they were able to discover that the only place that those parts had been was that one canopy bed, nothing else. But it was an entire planet in Innerworld because the abusers need the child to look ridiculous and the adult that they become to look ridiculous when they speak of these other places that they've been because they know that it was just the bed. And so they laugh and they make things more difficult. But if you can get your purple part, your pink part on your team, your blue part, you will be able to do so much. Purple will be the one to cause the most damage, the fastest. They can duplicate, they can become multiple people, they can become multiple parts, they can jump from split to split. It's they're very powerful. If you can get them on your side and be able to catch them in their deception and understand that it's trained deception, you can do a lot of work with them. But the color programming goes in so many directions. I could not even be able to end half of the things that I have to say. And I hate how long it has to take, but I hope that this has been helpful.
No, this has been greatly helpful. And with the charts, I think it's given people a lot to chew on, and it's quite in depth, but also it's as simple as noticing how you react, and
Yes,
noticing other people's of emotions to very simple colors. So I think, there's a lot for people to chew on. I greatly appreciate your time, and I'd love to have another conversation and do what we can to help people free themselves from this shit. Is there any last words that you have for the people?
I would just say your system and you are a family. Your system and you will have the heroes, the movies, the books, all the influences that are used to make you feel ashamed that you're taking on the appearance of something, or you're acting, or you made this up, or you're creative and you should get into the field so that your talent can be used. Whatever it is, deep down within your system, the deepest relief that you will discover is that the, the persecutor that everyone is is shaming and that feels the deepest loss of all of the things that they might have done the things that they get blamed for the entire body, they can be the hero to the little. The littles that need comfort, they can get the things that they need. The caretakers that have experienced loss after loss, lost children, lost relationships, they can get partnered, whether in inner world or outer world. There is a lot of hope that is within the system. There is a lot of things that you're not being allowed to know, and it doesn't need to be complex to the point where you're not allowed to feel like the character that you liked in the movie, the book, or whatever it is. You can transform your story. They made you build your inner world. That's how it got there. They took something you already built, your creativity, your skill set, your mind, and they utilized what they already knew about you, and they hid pockets of lies in something that you created that was great to begin with. And that was their tool. You can get access to that tool and get rid of them.
Absolutely. You know, all they can do is try to use you. You know, you are the one, and all we're taking is ourselves back. So
Yes.
I greatly appreciate you speaking here today, and for the charts that you've shared. And I look forward to having future conversations with you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thank you for talking.